Let the funeral director be the funeral director. I can't tell any other preacher what to do, but I am going to share concerns from a funeral professional side on everybody wanting to close the casket. I been a preacher since 1994. I was licensed, ordained by the late Bishop G.E. Patterson. At that day in Temple Deliverance, there probably were 25 to 30 funerals a month just of TOD members. That's not counting that Bishop G.E. was especially nice, that even if your kin didn't go to the church, he'll let them have their funeral there. That just doesn't happen everywhere anymore. So probably of my time of ministry from 1994 to 2001, I probably saw the late Bishop G.E. Patterson do 75 to 100 funerals personally. Matter of fact, I knew everything he was going to say, when he was going to say it, and everything else. 75 to 100 funerals personally. I never saw him close a casket. The concern, as a former funeral professional, I ran a large cemetery. And then I trained at the feet of the late M.J. Edwards, the late Evelyn Cooper, the late G.P. Gillespie, the late Adriana Harrison. I got trained, sometimes sat for hours listening to Ed Ford pontificate, Harold Ford pontificate, and Eddie Hayes pontificate, the late Edgar Miller. So I know the business. Plus, I talk to large funeral homes all around the country every day. This is a concern when every preacher wants to deal and become a funeral director on the service. One concern is that no matter how nice the casket, no matter how nice the equipment, no matter how great the funeral staff is, human error and problems with whatever you buy, equipment, can happen. So you're closing and you break the casket at the hinges. Maybe a director is trained enough to know what to do. That was one of the things I learned in the cemetery, that no matter how great the equipment, no matter how great the product, the staff, the cemetery, human error, time, chance, and problems can happen. The greatest thing about a funeral professional is that while everything is gone totally crazy, the family will stay calm if the funeral professional stays calm. But when the pastor breaks something, pastor's in a panic because he doesn't deal with this every day. I know you say, I do all the funerals, but you ain't never broke nothing before. Or perhaps you're exposing something about the deceased that the funeral professional knew to hide or not let everybody see. Being a preacher, the high point of any funeral service, I think, is because funerals are invariably not as much for the gone away or the passed away as they are for the living. You have the chore of being the yeoman of the gospel to eulogize or bring, if etymological root, a good word. So why do you have to be the funeral director? Why do you have to stand at the casket and shake everybody's hands at the place where the director used to do? I talk to directors all over the country, from big to small. I'm the biggest of the big. I'm on the phone with them. To people who are doing one service and that might not have had a service all month. So the funeral business is going through a change. There's 20 years ago, people of color would not cremate. Well, they're cremating at a rapid rate now. So margins have changed. Profit centers have been adjusted. So What if the service that you're trying to be the director on, what if that director had had 9 direct cremations in a row? And here you come with, for their one moment to shine, to show why they went to school, to why they chose this noble craft, which invariably provides a good living. But most directors aren't rich, as most funeral professionals aren't rich. They make a comfortable living, but they're not rich as the public would think. I know everybody wants to be a funeral director, but think of this. They have had your family, your church members, all week long. They saw Mama scold Junebug. They saw Quita try to swing at Shawnette. And they had to keep all this going. Their family's still fighting over the color of the casket. They're fighting over what cemetery they chose. And the director's been doing this all week. And here they come to the climax of their service to this family. It's funeral day. And now they're replaced to the back while pastor wants to preach and be the funeral director. Come on. Look at this. That's just doing way too much. One mistake can make you break a hinge. One mistake can make you expose that maybe Junebug couldn't really fit in that casket the way that he should, because the family didn't have the funds to buy an oversized. So if you can't be oversized, they have to lift you up. So you just expose that to everybody. So look, maybe facilitate the service and give these independent business people a chance to shine. They went to school. They have thankless jobs. They suffer a whole lot. And now the margins have changed. Business is changing. Things have shifted. The script has been flipped. And they can't even shine doing what they love to do. Be the preacher. You don't have to be the funeral director. Be the preacher. You don't have to close every casket. Be the preacher. You don't have to greet everyone that walks by. I know that sometimes at a funeral, you get folks that ain't never been to church before, because Junebug gonna come to Big Mama's service. I don't care where Junebug is coming. But look, let the funeral director be the funeral director. I'm closing with this. I ran a large cemetery. So when you run a large cemetery for large groups, every grave doesn't necessarily face east. So I had a young preacher come in and he blasted me. I can't believe y'all got this grave facing east. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, that's how our cemetery's set up. I explained it. Then he just kept on and on and on and on. And my job was to provide a service, not to be a preacher on staff. But I had to challenge him. I said, young man, now what scripture are you referring to that you have to face east? I said, and I pulled him away. I said, I didn't say anything while you were embarrassing me. I really want to tell them you're the 5th senior pastor from this same church I've seen in the last 3 years. But that wasn't my place to say. And sure enough, he was gone in a few months. But I had to tell him, that's tradition. There's no scripture there. Nothing. Or else, as if the grace of God is directional. But look, sometimes we need to stay the preacher and let the funeral professional be the funeral professional. That's my opinion. Can't tell you what to do, but you all are causing a whole lot of chatter amongst the funeral community. They may not tell you in your church, but they're going to have, after the repast and they go home, they are very discouraged that you want to do their job. Be blessed.